Good morning, everybody. I see everybody's logging on here. It's good to see everybody this morning. We're having a few technical difficulties this morning with our speaker, and we have not been able to get them on the call yet. So I apologize for the delay in this, and they're still feverishly trying to get the connection right now. I guess this is what happens when we try to have people on the line from all over the world. But so we apologize for the technical difficulties we're having. And like I said, it's good to see everybody, and thank you so much for being patient. So we're still going to give people a few minutes here as people are logging on. We'll admit them in from the waiting room. But in the meantime, while we were waiting for our speaker to try to get on the line with us, I thought maybe I'd just introduce all of us here from IEF. There's three of us that basically are employees here at IEF, and my name is Julie Bates, and I'm probably the newest employee here. And if you are a donor to IEF, you've probably received emails from me. So I'm the donor relations manager, and I've been here for about a year and a half. And we also have on the line Sarah Conley, who's our conservation coordinator. So a lot of you, if you've been around and been a supporter of IEF for a while, you've probably run across Sarah or heard Sarah's name. And we also have on the line our executive director, Miss Deborah Olson, and she is there. And she's been the director for probably since the inception of IEF. So anyway, that's the three of us. So as we're going through this morning and waiting, we thought maybe we would see if anybody on the line has any questions or anything that they might want to ask us directly while we're on the line. And you can do that by maybe putting something in the chat if something comes to mind, a specific question you might have. And then in the meantime, I think Sarah's going to give us a little overview of the project that we were going to be talking about this morning. So I think I'll turn it over to Sarah right now, and she'll give you a little overview of the project, and we'll go from there. If you have questions, just start putting them in the chat. Thank you.
Hi guys, good morning. We apologize again for the technical difficulties. Sometimes connectivity in Africa is not as predictable as we would hope. But we're very excited to talk about all things Conservation Lower Zambezi today. Conservation Lower Zambezi is an organization that IEF has partnered with for multiple years, and we support right now two different avenues of their work. First, patrol in the Lower Zambezi National Park in the Lower Zambezi Valley, and also a canine unit, which is very exciting. So the Lower Zambezi National Park forms part of the greater Lower Zambezi Valley system, which spans actually Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Mozambique. Despite ongoing law enforcement efforts, the National Wildlife Authority, the Department of National Parks and Wildlife, and a bunch of different organizations working together, conservation work in that region is critically underfunded and obviously made worse by the COVID-19 pandemic, because a lot of funding came directly from things like park fees, tourist activities, all the things that you would normally think of that would keep an economy going. So this not only severely restricts their ability to effectively fulfill their mandate as wildlife protection authorities, but also negatively impacts the morale and dedication of the officers and staffs themselves, people who are risking their lives on a daily basis to protect their natural heritage and wildlife. So IEF is very mindful to be respectful and grateful of these brave community members. And we're very proud to have supported them for all of these years, especially through these trying times. Conservation Lower Zambezi was actually founded in 1994, specifically to address threats to wildlife, things like poaching and wildlife crime, illegal harvesting, Um, and they've grown off of three main pillars of support: wildlife protection, environmental education, and community empowerment. Um, we have supported what started as village scout or community scout patrols, which are now referred to as the Luanga uh, patrols. And this is of particular concern as it's a remote area of the park. It lies near the border of Mozambique and Zimbabwe, and it's kind of a hotspot of movement of illegal wildlife trade. Some of those borders in that part of Africa are very porous, and this is an area that needs particular attention. Um, the Luanga area is a significant distance from base camp, so providing support for these patrolmen, for these scouts, is very important in order to maintain that strong presence. And they're able to monitor this critical area, which is very important. One of the things that you might be interested in, that region has many iconic species, including leopards, lions, Cape buffalo, hippo, so many different variety of ungulates, over 400 different bird species, as well as African wild dog, pangolin. So the biodiversity is rich. Many are endangered species. It's a lot to take into account on top of the African savanna elephants, which of course are our focus. But as we all know, African elephants and elephants in general are an umbrella species. So if we protect them, we are protecting everything else within their habitat, including the habitat itself. Um, so one of the things that is of note, in 2016, this area included or had a significant rise in poaching, with actually a record number of 107 elephants poached that year. That encouraged Conservation Lower Zambezi to redouble their efforts. And in the 4 years subsequent to that, they got poaching reduced by 90%. And we're still continuing that progress. And that is a testament to their commitment and a testament to the support given by IEF donors and everyone else who is helping to bolster this work. One of the ways that they felt a good way to address this wildlife crime was creating the canine unit. So in 2019 and 2020, IEF and other donors worked together to focus on a goal of no poaching of elephants inside Lower Zambezi National Park. And we helped respond to this surge in wildlife crime by developing specialized units. And that's the canine unit and rapid response unit, developing partnerships with the investigative and intelligence units as well. So in 2016, a 4-man, 2-dog canine detection and dog tracking unit was set up for the region. And that moves between the CLZ base camp and trafficking hotspots in areas of the Lower Zambezi. And one of the things that these dogs do, they're trained not only for tracking, but for detection of illegal wildlife products like ivory, bushmeat, pangolin, rhino horn, firearms, ammunition, pelts. These dogs are, as you guys probably are aware, dogs have an incredible sense of smell. So this is a really strong training program for them, and really good for them to keep them mentally stimulated and healthy. So they search vehicles and people at various checkpoints, and as well as doing village sweeps. They've led a number of confiscations, apprehensions of poachers. And this has been such an important part of what they do that it was important to expand this unit. This track record was so successful uh, that through generous funding, we were able to help create uh, a 3-dog, 10-man team that is operational and still going. Uh, so poachers and illegal wildlife traders rely increasingly on advanced smuggling techniques to try to keep their activities and goods hidden from law enforcement authorities. So these detection dogs combined with the Luangwa patrols are really an effective team for this region. And we are very proud to be able to support this. So far, so good. We're still waiting for our speakers.
Yep. And in the meantime, Sarah, it looks like we do have a few questions here. One of the questions from Cora was to maybe talk a little bit more about umbrella species. Some people on the line may not really know what that means. And maybe you could elaborate a little bit on what that means.
Absolutely. So, Debbie, why don't you talk about umbrella species while I try to pull up a graphic that may help? Can you do that or? Okay, maybe not. So, umbrella species, if you think about it, elephants are, well, they're the charismatic, important giant species in the region. But if we just focus on them, there is sort of a ripple effect or umbrella coverage that happens through the whole habitat. So if you protect elephants, you are by default also protecting, say, the rhinos or the giraffes or the pangolin or the African wild dog or zebras who are also in that region, because conservation doesn't happen in a vacuum. You have a number of species right down to the microorganisms who live in elephant footprints who benefit from the presence of elephants in that region. So if you have a healthy habitat with elephants who are eating forage and helping with forest migration and all of the normal things that they do by existing in a habitat, that is creating positive ecological benefits for those species. So in a way, you can think about elephants as the umbrella that protects all the other species in the habitat. So it's a carryover benefit. It's a bonus, so to speak. So if you're protecting elephant habitat, you're also protecting giraffe habitat. You're also protecting pangolin habitat. Whatever species also lives there. And so that's why in the conservation world, we refer to elephants as an umbrella species. If Julie, if you want to chat for a minute,
So
I will pull up.
absolutely. So while you're pulling that up, I see that we have a question here about how old is IEF and
Debbie?
You cut out. I heard how old is IEF, so I can answer
Oh.
that question.
Okay, great.
IEF was formed in 1998. We were incorporated in 1999, and so we've been going ever since. What was the second part of that question?
Well, let's see here. They wanted to know how it was formed. How was IEF formed?
In the late 1990s, myself and some others within the elephant community, within the zoo elephant community, we're doing quite a bit of research, primarily elephant reproductive research. And we were continually frustrated because of the lack of funds to continue to do this really important research. And we just kept, I guess, complaining about the lack of funds to the point that a individual at the Fort Worth Zoo, Michael Foraker, said, well, if there's a lack of funds, then why don't you develop a foundation, an elephant foundation that is primarily for raising funds to put toward research. At that time it was research, but there was such a need in conservation as well. We said, well, let's broaden our scope. If we're going to be doing this foundation, then let's do it for all elephants, both captive and wild. And that was how we began. It was initially kind of based on the International Rhino Foundation, which had been developed 10 to 15 years earlier and was a extremely successful organization. And so basing our organization initially on their how they had formed and how they worked gave us a really good start.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have another question here. It says, how do IEF and the International Elephant Project relate as organizations?
We are independent of each other.
There are so many elephant organizations out there, which is great because people love elephants. But IEF and the International Elephant Project, IEP, are completely independent of each other and totally separate. Similar to how your local Humane Society is not in any way affiliated with the Humane Society of the United States, the national animal rights charity. They are totally separate. IEF and IEP are not the same and not affiliated with each other either. But we both love elephants.
Thank you, Sarah. Also, somebody's asking about the graphic. So I see you have the graphic up now of the umbrella species.
Yes, so this is essentially just a meme, for lack of a better word, an internet visual showing that elephants are sort of the overarching protector of some of these example species. Now, this graphic has graphics of animals that live not only with African elephants, but also with Asian elephants. So in there, you'll see a tapir, you'll see a gharial, so it depends on what habitat, obviously, that we're talking about, but anywhere there are elephants, whatever species lives in that habitat, even species of flora, benefits from that habitat protection. For example, in Sumatra, in a region known as Sablat, we have conservation response units that patrol habitat that actually protect one of the last habitats for the world's largest flower, known as the Rafflesia. It's this giant red, it looks prehistoric, like out of Land of the Lost. This giant red flower that's bigger than your chest. It's a giant thing. So even protecting elephants in that weird patch of habitat protects this super rare endangered flower.
All right.
So we are preparing a series of photos and video to show everyone.
let's
This
see.
works.
All right, let's see if we can. All right, let's see here. I think that I might be able to share my screen now and we can see some of these pictures that that Debbie has downloaded here for us to look at. So can everybody see my screen here? Let's see if we can get these enlarged.
Yes. So this is the canine unit, the detection and tracking unit.
Can you guys see that?
Yes, I think so.
So here's what
We're getting
it looks
thumbs
like.
up. So
What's that?
we got some thumbs up. So I think everyone's seeing all these cool images.
There's an up close shot there. Okay, and here's a video. Let's see if we can get the video to come up here. Okay.
Let's see.
Did you have some other pictures, Sarah? Or
I think I have another video that I can share.
okay, great.
Are there any questions in the meantime?
Don't see any other questions. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, Cora has her hand up. You want to just unmute, Cora?
Well, I did that accidentally, but I was going to type
Oh.
another question. I was
Oh,
going to type
okay.
another question, but do any of you know like how the man and dog units work? I mean, do they work against poachers, or like does the dog smell things that are, you know, animals that are poached in those, you know, satchels and so on? How does it work in general? The teams with the dogs.
So they are trained to sniff out, to scent ivory and other animals. They will do some tracking, limited primary roles to work traffic and traffic stops, and to investigate cars, trucks, vehicles, people, and to much like in the airport, sniff in people's luggage, or you know, in the product that the truck is transporting. They're very effective. Of course, this is hard work for dogs, and that's why they have 3 dogs, so that in any one day, a dog is rested, so they're not working every single day. And training is always ongoing, that you always have to reinforce your training. So every day the dogs are worked with in order to maintain that behavior at this level. In addition, twice a year, they have people come in and help reinforce the training of the dogs and the handlers, and to make sure that the handlers are reinforcing dogs correctly and training correctly. So it's an ongoing training of the dogs, and they've been extremely effective.
Thank you.
All right, we have another video that we can show. Can you all see that so far?
Yes.
All right.
My name is Julius Makindikaputo. I'm a wildlife scout working as a special deployment officer under the Rapid Response Unit in Lower Zambezi Waste Management Area. Part of my work is to make sure that I'm on the ground, proactively. Also, making sure that, the poaching levels are controlled inside and outside the national park, covering the whole parts of the Lower Zambezi National Park and the Chihuahua game management areas. We have seen a number of difficulties in the way we are operating due to the coming of coronavirus into our world, just like the whole world have experienced. We have had situations whereby our movements have been restricted. Even if we have intel, we need to act on. It's very difficult to pass in through cities because they have been locked down. Hence, we have seen, like a situation whereby in areas where we have controlled, controlled snaring and poaching, we have seen now the start of poaching those areas and putting of new snares like we have, experienced. So that shows us that because we cannot move, because we cannot do our operations normally like we used to do prior to the coming of coronavirus, it is because of the coronavirus which is making it very difficult for us to carry out our day-to-day, duties. But however, we have seen a smooth run in terms of, the operations and the logistics because of the continued support from the International Elephant, Foundation, which is always on board, to support, COZ, and we have the resources that we want despite living in these difficult times of coronavirus. Thank you very much to the International Elephant Foundation for their continued support to Conservation Lower Zambezi, and we have seen the smooth running of our operation despite, being in this difficult time of the coronavirus era. Thank you.
So you can see they are really coming from a gorgeous location. Definitely inspires everyone to want to protect such an amazing place. Let's see, I think I have another video where they sort of walk through how they train the dogs, or at least a training exercise, because as Debbie was saying, even if the dogs aren't on patrol, you need to maintain that level of interaction and training. So why don't we watch this, and you can sort of see one of the ways that they teach the dogs.
Yes, afternoon everyone. My name is Douglas Tembo. I'm one of the attachment member in the canine unit. I have with me here a target, which is ivory piece. I'm gonna hide it in one of these holes for the bar, one of our dog to come and find it. I think everyone is aware here that bar is not with us, but bar, I'm pretty sure that bar will come and find this target. So I'm hiding the target now in absence of bar. Bar is not here with his hand wrap. Now bar is find the target. We are going to the target, put it somewhere else.
Hello.
Thank you, International Elephant Foundation and the Berry Family Trust.
All right, well, I think we actually have Nikita from CLZ finally here. We are so happy to have her.
Yay.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
So our technical difficulties, I think Debbie, Julie, and I were all kind of vamping a little bit, telling a little bit background about CLZ and showing some of your project videos. So we are so happy to have you.
Really sorry about all that. Yeah.
I think there was a bit of time difference miscommunication that we had. So sorry, everyone.
Well, we are so happy to have you here. Thank you. So why don't we let you take it away? Because I know everyone so far has been so interested in your work and asked a lot of great questions. We gave a little intro about the patrols and about the canine units. You just saw that video that you guys shared. So go ahead and you can share your screen or do whatever you had planned.
Thanks so much. And again, so sorry for being late. Let me share my screen here. Is there the option to share screen? Share. Sorry, I'm just trying to, we put together a little presentation. And so we just wanted to share that with everyone. Yeah, I thought it was desktop. Sounds like presentation open. Okay, so we just wanted to give everyone a little background on CLZ and what we do and how we work, and to and to discuss how the International Elephant Foundation have supported us and our work in Zambia and ultimately with wildlife conservation across the landscape here.
Right. Nikita and I are just going to try to split this up a little bit. My name's Ian Stevenson, the CEO of Conservation Lower Zambezi. I've been down here for 20 years, and it's sort of home to me. I think one thing that's really important to understand is why an organization like Conservation Lower Zambezi, or CLZ, is here. And it's basically the governments don't have the resources to put into the full protection and awareness raising and community engagement and everything to manage their wonderful resources that they have. Zambia's got some of the biggest open ecosystems in the whole of Africa. In particular, it's got three. Ours is massive. It's over 20,000 square kilometers, the whole area, which I'll show you a slide on before. And because they don't have those resources, a lot of the stakeholders in the area, they got together, they formed Lower Zambezi 27 years ago, I think it is now. And we now give a lot of input into this area and a lot of protection. And a lot of it is only possible because of the likes of the International Elephant Fund. Yeah. So our three main areas that we work in are wildlife protection, environmental education, and community engagement. And I think what's important for people to understand is with the wildlife protection, that's like the short fix right now. It's stopping, it's stopping what is happening right now. But the long term is the education and awareness and the engagement and benefits going back to the community. So there's two sort of different approaches that we take. One is trying to protect what is here right now, but changing the mindset of people in the long term to protect it in the long term. So just going to the next one. So our big areas where we operate, you can see that red is the Lower Zambezi National Park. We're surrounded by what we refer to as game management areas, GMAs. Those game management areas are mixed utilization areas. So there's people living in them. There's often hunting in them. There's photographic tourism in them. In some of ours, there is agriculture, etc. So they're mixed use areas, and they create buffer zones around the national parks. And if you look at those sizes on the right hand of the screen, you'll see it's almost 20,000 square kilometers, which is, I mean, on a global scale, are massive, big ecosystems that we're trying to protect. Yeah. So on the wildlife protection side, we've got a multiple sort of bag of tools that we use. The traditional boots on the ground, the foot patrols that we support, which is the Department of National Parks here. They have their personnel and trained personnel, but they don't have the resources to get them out there in the field. So we help them with things like uniforms and equipment and rations and communications and vehicles and fuel and all of that sort of thing. So that's the real sort of basis of what we do. And there's no way to get around that. It's not necessarily the most effective way to protect the area, but it is, it's something that really needs to be done. Then because there is a national shortfall of human resources in Zambia, we have our own community scout unit. So they have the same mandate and authority as the national park people, but they're employed through the communities and what we call a community resource board, who we work with to create these community scout units. We've got Zambia's first all-female unit, which is quite cool. That's what the photo there is of the community scout unit.
Back to work. So you want to make sure that you give them the opportunity.
Sorry, is there a question?
I think someone accidentally unmuted themselves, but don't worry. Keep going, guys.
That's all right. Let me finish this one little one, and then I will ask quickly, because I think that's a good point, that we would like people to be able to ask questions as we're going along. So as I was saying, the community scout unit, they're from the community, same mandate and authority as the national parks rangers, but they supplement basically the rangers because there is a lack of personnel in the field. So they're out there protecting the areas that we operate in as well. We pay them and manage them and help them, etc., equip them, etc., and do all the training. And it's really cool to have Zambia's first all-female teams in there. So before I go on to the other little bits in the toolbox, is there any questions right now?
If anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat or you can unmute yourselves.
Okay, if there's nothing coming up, I will just continue on and we can leave some questions for the end. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So one of the other areas is aerial support. So Conservation Lower Zambezi has a plane that does a lot of wildlife monitoring, but also that plane is responsible for finding about 50% of the illegal activity in the area. We supplement that plane with chopper helicopter operations 2 or 3 times a year. We bring them in because of the accessibility. Basically, it allows us that accessibility into some of the big remote areas of where we are. And then we have a detection dog unit, which I think Sarah has already spoken about, something we're really proud of, heavily supported by IEF and the Berry Foundation. So we're incredibly appreciative of that. And it's one of our flagship sort of tools that we have. It doesn't fix everything, but it creates a huge deterrent in the area. And as a specialized unit, they're one of the most successful of all of the units that we have at Conservation Lower Zambezi. So we have 3 dogs. We have 4 handlers that operate those 3 dogs, and they work mainly around the national park, in the national park as well, but mainly around it. So hopefully sort of stopping the activities before they happen in the park. And they've been incredibly successful over I think it's 5 years now we've had them running. Yeah. And then we have a rapid response unit. They're similar to the canine unit, except without the canine. And they are heavily funded, so they have a lot better support with their own vehicles, higher level of training, etc. They have also been very successful around the national park, and we're putting a lot of work into the specialized units. You'll see there's investigations and intelligence units. We've got 3 of them that we work with partners around the national park. And a lot of the work we're doing now is not just the boots on the ground in the park, but it's all this work with intelligence and intelligence-led operations around the national park. And then the last bit of the wildlife protection, we recognized a need, because we're on the border of Zimbabwe and of Mozambique where we are. There's a lot of cross-border trade. So we've put a lot of work into sort of cross-border collaboration with the different security authorities from Mozambique and from Zimbabwe. And that seems to be gaining some traction now and having sort of good results from it. We do a lot of work on the rivers, which the boundaries between the different countries here, and the fisheries management, which is another a very sort of contentious issue between the different stakeholders of the area, whether it be the community, the tourism operators, the poachers, all of that. So I put a lot of work into that. And then the last thing on the wildlife protection side is that we found we were having great success in the field and arresting people, etc., but then the judicial system was letting us down. So we now have our own full-time Zambian lawyer who follows all of the cases that we have, and our prosecution rate has gone up to 80 or 90% now, and it seems to be working very well. But also a lot of awareness raising within that judicial system. You know, we bring the magistrates into the area so that they understand what their cases are about in court, and that has been really, really successful. I'll hand over to Nikita quickly. Yeah.
So while CLZ was originally founded because of the rise in poaching, and it was all law enforcement, majority of it was law enforcement at the very beginning, they also realized that by having the GMAs so close to the park, there is also a big human aspect to conservation. And, you're not going to protect the park fully and the wildlife unless you have local investment and understanding and education as well. And so CLZ developed the environmental education program and the community support empowerment program. And so the education program works to target the influential age of students from 11 to 18 high school students in the communities in the Lower Zambezi. So we've reached up to 65 schools now around in the GMAs around the national park. And we do a number of different activities with all of these schools. So we've developed an education curriculum, and this curriculum is distributed to all the conservation clubs in all the schools and during our educators outreach program. So during his outreach, he distributes the curriculum. He teaches the teachers how to teach conservation to the students. He looks at how the students are doing from past years, and he sees if there's more attendance, if they're interested, what the student feedback is in all the schools. Then we also do school visits. So every year we bring in 6 school visits a year from the different communities, and each school visit has 24 students and 4 teachers. And during this time, they get to come to the Lower Zambezi, they go into the national park, they see wildlife in their natural habitat. Usually these children are growing up in communities where wildlife is seen as very negative because there are a lot of subsistence farmers, for example, in these communities, and their parents' fields are being raided by elephants. And so the parents hate elephants, and there's a lot of negativity. Whereas when they come here, they get to experience it in its the wildlife in its natural habitat. They understand a little better about what conservation means, what alternatives there are. And so there's a lot of experience that they get firsthand by being at the CLZ base camp and experiencing these things. And then we also do a teacher training, because the teachers that teach these conservation clubs are just regular everyday math and English teachers from these schools. And so basically we bring them in every year to teach them how to convey these conservation messages to their students. And we've always wondered, how is the best way to evaluate an environmental education program? And one of the nice things we say that does happen and we see in the Lower Zambezi is that students graduate from high school and grow up to be guides in the Lower Zambezi, and they grow up to work in law enforcement in conservation. And so they are growing up to work into these green jobs that we were hoping, rather than growing up and being involved in poaching. And another thing we do in our education is scholarships. So through a few different donors, we support high school students in finishing their schooling, to encourage education, to encourage students to continue their education and finish. And we also support 3 university students who are studying wildlife conservation at a university in Zambia. And the hopes is, again, that they grow up to contribute to the area that they grew up in, rather than negatively contribute to that area. And then one thing our education program has developed is ICT-based learning. So our whole curriculum, our education curriculum, has been developed into 5 modules onto tablets. And so students now get this other level of learning when they come to the CLZ base camp, or when our educator goes on outreach, and then they're able to understand the lessons that we're teaching by using these tablets and learning how to answer questions on them and interact with them. And we've noticed that ever since we implemented tablets into the schools, the attendance rates have gone up. They're more interested, they're more engaged. And so that's been a really interesting thing to learn. And we also developed an HIV and AIDS curriculum on there, which is now our 6th module, because it's always important to emphasize those issues with these children from these villages where these things are still very prevalent issues. And so we added that curriculum in. And then also to do with our communities, we do a whole community engagement or empowerment program. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of human wildlife conflict in certain areas where elephants raid crops, hippos raid crops, and then the communities want to do retaliation killings. and things like that. And so what we do is look for alternative livelihoods. In some case, we do a number of things because everything has to work together. One of them is alternative livelihoods. So we're looking at things like what crops they can grow that will deter animals. Like we've heard that elephants don't like chilies. So we do a chili workshop every year where we teach farmers how to grow chilies, use chili seeds to make chili fences. And now they also use the chilies as a cash crop and are profiting from it. So it has a few more good things to it rather than just warding off elephants. It's also showing economic gain as well. In addition, we noticed women in the community are such a minority group, and we needed to find some way to empower these women, because once they are empowered and relating that empowerment to conservation, they are teaching their children these conservation messages because they believe in it too. So we've started quite a few women groups, 3 tailoring groups with a total of 31 women in it, 2 groups of ladies that have set up hippo fences, which have 22 women in it, 2 groups where we've done chicken projects. So one are layer chickens, one are broiler chickens, and that's about 20 women. And so there's quite a lot of women involved now that are financially benefiting from alternative livelihoods, and that can be possibly also swayed away from poaching and snaring and being involved in illegal activities. And then every year, because during the peak harvesting season, we know that elephants are a big issue in certain areas. So our community scouts, we send them into certain high wildlife conflict areas. And so they help to patrol, to ward off elephants and those kinds of things. And then we also do a number of human wildlife conflict and living with elephant behavior workshops. So people actually get the chance to understand what warning signs an elephant gives, what if you build a house on where elephant paths are, they're going to trample your house. So just understanding the wildlife better, and so they can mitigate the risks that they have more. And in addition, we do it with an anti-snare campaign. So teaching them that that actually is now a legal offense. You can go to jail, you can be fined up to this amount if you're caught. It's not just a slap on the wrist. It's a severe offense. And so we do a number of workshops and campaigns just to make sure they're aware, they understand, and that there are also alternatives that we're helping to provide in the communities. And a big thing for last year, obviously, and into this year, is COVID-19. And communities in this area were so severely affected because usually this area is thriving because of the tourism. And when COVID came in, a lot of that changed. And so we put in a lot of effort into supporting these communities because the job losses from the community members and revenue loss was severe. And so we decided to look at emergency funding, and donors were very flexible on how to help change funds to support the more pressing needs. And so we supported the communities in terms of COVID awareness, COVID support in terms of their hospitals with medications and PCRs and gloves, and we masks. We made the women's groups, we provided them with materials to make masks, which we then provided to the communities. So a number of mitigation methods and awareness was provided to the communities, as well as a few more alternative livelihood projects for communities that were struggling so much from revenue lost from tourism. And I will give it back to Ian.
Right. The last little bit we thought we'd touch on, which we're really excited about. One of the things we have done, over the 25 years or 27 years of CLZ is help with a little bit of animal rescue. So we do get snared animals down here, whether it be a hippo, an elephant, or lion, or whatever. So we help with taking snares off. We help with orphaned animals, etc. And then we started probably about 8 or 10 years ago, dabbling more into the research side. And it's something that IEF has been really good about. They've supported a camera trap project for us now for 4 years, I think it is now. Yeah. And where we run an annual camera trap program and just try to identify presence of animals in certain areas, also a waterhole count, etc. So we've started dabbling more into the research side. And this is leading on to what we're calling a restoration program for the Lower Zambezi, and we feel our protection is getting close to the level where we can now look at bringing back in species that are either depleted or have been locally extinct in this area, and that includes black rhinos. So we developed with other partners, we've developed a restoration program. It's a 10-year program, and with the ultimate goal of bringing black rhino back into the area. It has now been endorsed by the ministry in Zambia, and so it's something we're putting a lot more effort into right now, and hopefully in the coming years we will see black rhino coming back in here, which is a real sort of credit to the efforts of everyone in the national park system and all the team at CLZ and all the donors that have supported us over the years. So yeah, so that's the last bit that we wanted to touch on, because it's a nice way to finish off. And then it was just to say a huge thank you to everyone who has supported IEF, but also us through IEF and the Berry Foundation, etc., because we could never do what we do without people like yourselves giving us that support. So we can't say thank you enough for that. Yeah.
And we believe somebody from the Berry Family Trust is here today. So we're really glad that you are, and thank you for all your support.
So yeah, if there's any questions at all, that we would love to be able to try to answer.
Wonderful. Well, as always, you guys are definitely a better spokespeople than we are as far as telling the multifaceted things that everything you guys are doing. I know I'm impressed every time I hear more about it, but I'm happy that you guys touched on so much. I think everyone realizes that conservation is not a simple issue. It's one of those things where, like you guys were talking about, there are many different approaches, and you sort of need to have all of those different approaches. Like, the communities need to feel that you're invested in them. Otherwise, they're not going to feel invested in protecting the wildlife, things like that. So we have some questions, and then we'll ask people to unmute and ask. But we had one person ask, what are the 3 main obstacles to elephant conservation, and what would your miracle solutions be? Like pie in the sky, anything you can think of.
Wow.
Yeah.
Difficult one. I think that, the poaching, I'll start on one and make it more difficult for Nikita. Yeah. The reality is that the poaching of elephants is a big issue. It comes because of poverty. It becomes because there are very few alternatives to the people here. And then I think the second big threat to the elephants is the lack of habitat. As the habitat is shrinking all over Africa, that ability for elephants to survive in large numbers and move within areas and ecosystems is shrinking and more difficult. And I think it's something that Zambia is incredibly proud of, and lucky and fortunate that we have these massive big ecosystems. There's no reason elephants can't move from here 1,000 kilometers to the north of here. There's corridors that link us to the north to South Luangwa and North Luangwa, and really, to be honest, up on into Malawi and into Tanzania. So to keep those big corridors open is one solution. To raise awareness, alleviate some of the poverty is another one, because without, if people weren't impoverished, they wouldn't be going
so
to
desperate
to
poach. Yeah.
So those are probably the big areas. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think that is one thing. And, something that we've seen change, obviously we've managed to see how the elephant population or the elephant poaching has decreased through efforts, through also international efforts where the demand in ivory dropped. And so it was globally elephant after 2016 rates were high Africa wide, and then we've seen a decline in elephant poaching, which has been amazing. But we've also suddenly, between last year and the year before, we noticed a difference in elephant poaching, and it's all to do with poverty, like Ian said. But before, it was because there was demand of ivory and they could do that, but now we're finding, because of COVID, people are just poaching for their meat now, and ivory in some cases are still intact, and we think certain elephants were poached for their bushmeat and to feed families at a critical time. And so it's all really complex, like Sarah said, when it comes to why people are poaching and the drivers, and having methods in place to tackle all of those things, because they're different drivers at some point, but it does all lead back to empowering communities, giving them economic gain and income and opportunities, healthcare, education, all of those things.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. I think Debbie had a question.
Yes, I've become much more aware in our work throughout Africa about young women as they mature, as they to continue their education because of a lack of facilities or the fact that they are now maturing into womanhood, and there is a problem with them being able to take care of themselves while at school. So I saw your picture of those young girls going to school, and I was wondering, are you having the same problem? Is that also an issue in your area?
Yeah, so I don't mind answering this for you. Absolutely. In the communities here, still early child pregnancies are such a big issue, right? Women empowerment as well, women perceptions of their roles in these communities are still very, let's say old school. And so that is still absolutely a problem. And so that's why in everything we do, we try to encourage moving away from those ideals. So in the scholarships that we're supporting these school children, there are female students that are being supported. And it's also with the caveat that, we're teaching you about using contraception and being careful not to fall pregnant and all these things, and in the hopes that we are also supporting your education so that you can go further and do something with your life, and showing them role models of people, Zambians as well, that have done this and what they're doing and what they're able to achieve. We also, we just, like Ian was saying, we just established Zambia's first female community scout unit, and they're all young girls, and some of them have children and some of them have incredible stories to tell, but they applied, they trained in the same training program that they trained men in, and they survived, and now they are this unit, and they are fierce, and they are pretty strong. Sorry, it says my internet is unstable. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, yeah. So we're just saying they are, we are showing these community scouts that are now established are also going to be role models for the other women in the community, the other young girls in the community, showing them that they have opportunities, they can do things. And so in every aspect of community work we do, there's a very big women empowerment part from the education program straight through to the community program. We engage women in everything because that is still quite a big issue.
Thank you. Yeah, well, it just goes back to the fact that it's really hard to get people to care about wildlife when they have practical issues in their own life they have to deal with, right? So you need a holistic view of conservation. Let's see. Does anyone else have any questions? Does anyone feel like unmuting and asking our gracious, wonderful guests? While we wait for people to think about things, why don't you guys talk to us a little bit more about the dogs and the training of the dogs, where you get them, things like that, because I think people really respond to that bond that they have.
Okay, yeah, I think dogs are in Africa. Dogs are relatively new. I mean, they've been used in the drug enforcement agency for quite a long time. It borders in some of the higher sort of profile countries like South Africa, etc. But in the conservation circles, they're quite new. And they were starting to be used, I think, probably, I'd say 5 to 10 years ago. And we got ours about 5 or 6 years ago. And they're imprinted on, you can imprint them on however many scents you want, but it does become quite confusing for them if there's too many. So we've started with scents such as rhino horn, which is one of the big trade items, ivory, obviously, bushmeat, and they can differentiate. They don't know it, and sometimes they get confused, but we imprint them on game bushmeat. We don't imprint them on domestic, like cattle meat. So they will pick up the game meat. But the problem is, how do you get the courts to know that the dogs know the difference? So there's a bit of work now being done on that too, on the whole judicial side, so that the dogs are recognized as like a professional witness in a court case, for example. So that's one of the big things. They're also imprinted on pangolin scales, which are now, I don't know if everyone's aware, but they're the sort of largest traded illegal wildlife product in the world now, pangolins and their scales. They're imprinted on guns and ammunition, and which is quite interesting, because when you think about it, guns and ammunition, it's a scent from the gunpowder, etc. But it's also steel, it's also brass, it's also copper, all those. And if you put them in a room to check a room, and there might be a light switch, and that light switch has copper and steel and some of those things in it as well, but they don't indicate on a light switch, but they indicate on a gun or ammunition or whatever it is. And how their brain works and how those receptors work, I don't know, but it's quite impressive to watch them working. Yeah. And then the last thing that we've imprinted them on, a couple of years ago, was pelts. So it's skins from the likes of leopards and lion. The tiger trade from Asia was a big illegal trade item quite a long time ago. As the tigers have diminished, people are replacing it with lion bones and lion skins, etc., for a lot of that traditional medicine. So the illegal trade in big cat skins and big cat bones and body parts has increased hugely. So we've imprinted them on those too. So those are the main 6 products. They work. We try as much as possible to have all of their operations intelligence led. So the canine team have a network of informers. They might hear about ivory being moved, for example, in a taxi from A to B. They have to then work out, how do they put a roadblock up? How do they get the warrant to stop that vehicle, or to go into a house, or whatever the case is, and then put the dogs on it and find where the illegal item is stashed or stored. And that, a little bit like the States, the poachers are now big, level syndicates. They're very sophisticated in how they operate. They're very sophisticated in how they hide items. They might put them in a stash of fish that is moving. So they'll put bushmeat in the middle. It's surrounded by fish, which is legally allowed to be moved. But the dogs have to be able to pick up the difference between that dried fish and the dried bushmeat that's within that. Yeah. And they've been successful in that. Not, we don't know if it's always, but they are incredibly successful. So they're, and I think something, maybe the last little point, and people often say, is it worth it? Because they're an expensive tool to have. To set them up is incredibly expensive. Not so much the buying of the dog, but the training of the dog and maintaining that level is very expensive. So is it worth that? And I think what makes it worth it for us is A, their success, which has been incredibly high, but B is the deterrent factor. And I think with any force, police force or law enforcement force around the world, what you're trying to do is make it harder and harder, and make it to a point where it is not worth someone's while to take that risk anymore. And so the dogs have helped with that a lot. If people know there's dogs, they question doing it. It's one of those added sort of deterrents for them. So incredible unit that we've got. And if anyone's got any questions on that too, you can see we all enjoy our dogs.
Wonderful. We do have a question. April, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, thank you very much. This is April Yoder, and I was just curious, who does the initial training for the dog?
Hi, April. There's a few different people who do it. We ended up going with a dog vendor and trainer who's actually Zimbabwean, but living in the States. So he does it's from a organization called Invictus Canine. He lives in the States, works with the police and the military in the States, but does a lot of work in Africa now with conservation dogs. So when you first get the dogs, there's quite a long period. It's usually around 3 months to do that initial imprinting of the dogs. And then twice a year, we get that same vendor to come back and do refresher courses for the dogs. Yeah.
And it's not just training of the dogs, it's training of the handlers on how to handle the dogs. It's training of them the handlers to understand how to read the dogs and how to make sure their dogs are settling in this environment. Our dogs came from Holland, right? So they have to settle into the heat stresses that are here, the different altitudes and things like that. So there's a lot of all of those things come into training as well.
Thank you very much.
We have another question. Someone's asking, can local dogs be trained to do this work? Maybe why get dogs from outside of the region?
So, yeah, that's a great question. And it's something that we've actually invested quite heavily in and put a lot of time and effort into it. Dog breeds like the ones we bring in from Europe, they've been bred to have a certain level of drive in them. Okay, the dogs, the local dogs, and they're actually a recognized African breed now. They're called Canis africanus, and we call them a village dog, but they are a recognized breed. And when we first started our dog unit, we decided to, because this Invictus Canine, the head instructor, Jay Crafter, he said to us, let's have a think about trying domestic local dogs. And the problem is you probably will not get a local dog and be able to train it the first time. But if you can train a series of them, so you train the first one, then you train its offspring, and then you train its next offspring, by 2 or 3 generations from now, you should be able to build that drive into those dogs. And the advantage, obviously, is that they're acclimatized to the area, they're acclimatized to the diseases and everything. And so we went into the village, we picked up a 8-week-old puppy, and we went through a whole selection process. We had hundreds of puppies being brought to us by different communities because everyone knew we were going to pay for a puppy. And I think the puppy was $8 and is what we paid in the end, compared to $5,000 for a dog from Europe. Yeah. So, and we brought it in and we had it for about 10 months. And that dog would detect, it would put its nose into a tube, and it would know which tube had the meat in it. So it was getting there. It also was able, as a 10-month-old, it was able to do tracking of about a half a kilometer, and it would follow tracks. And it's amazing to watch how you train that from a little puppy up to the point where it can track. And we were all so excited about it. It was a little bit of a problem with socialization because the local village dogs are very timid dogs. They're very scared. That they're treated differently than, say, one of the dogs from Europe, for example. And then really sadly, at 10 months old, it ended up getting a worm in its spine, and it was inoperable, and we ended up having to put the puppy down. Yeah. And it was one of the most horrible things I've gone through with my animals that I've ever had in my life. And it was absolutely terrible because it was an incredible dog. And the problem is the investment to do that is quite long-term and it's quite high. And so you really need someone who that's what they want to do, I think. And so we did talk about it again. We brought in 2 more dogs about 1.5 years ago, something like that. Yeah. And we talked about trying it again, but we actually didn't end up doing it. But it's definitely possible, but it's a long-term and expensive initial investment. But I think ultimately it is a solution to make it cheaper and easier, and the dogs are more conditioned to the environment. Yeah. That was a long answer for a short question. Yeah.
No, that was great. I think people like hearing the details and hearing about the sort of trials and tribulations that everyone goes through to get these results. It's important. We have another question. Sylvia says this presentation is most informative and she's intrigued by the conservation clubs in the schools. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about those.
Yeah, sure. So in the Zambian schools, this has actually always been a Zambian part of a Zambian curriculum. It's called the Chongololo Club. Chongololo is this little centipede in Zambia. And so every school has this club. So it's basically a conservation or environmental club. And so what we did was we tapped into this conservation club because it's basically already an established club in all the government schools. So we go into these conservation clubs and that's who we work with. So when we went into the schools, we knew they were already established clubs because it's always been a running thing for years within the Zambian curriculum. And so that was an easy way into all the schools. And so, yeah, now through our education program, we've brought in our curriculum, which is a bit more conservation focused, which, in schools in Lusaka, in the capital city of Zambia, it makes sense for them to have a broad environmental education program. But with here, these are kids growing up in communities where there's elephants and where there's all these big things that will either affect their lives or they can affect the wildlife's lives. And so through this conservation curriculum that we've developed, it's a bit more specialized to the areas. And so they get a bit more understanding of their localized situation. And so, yeah, through that, we've grown the program. It started off with fewer schools, and then every year our educator grew his reach to more and more schools. And now we're reaching about 65 schools in the area.
And we use the clubs also to identify the students that we bring to CLZ.
Yeah.
So they will have quizzes, and the ones who do really well and perform really well within their clubs, they're the ones who are selected to then come down to Lower Zambezi and stay at our camp and go into the park and do their game drives and their lessons and everything. So it works really well.
So I think we have one last question and then we'll probably let you go unless this brings up more questions. But I was wondering, are you part of the Transfrontier Boundary Project, the Kavanga Zambezi Transfrontier Conservation Project?
Yeah, we are part of what they call a TFCA, so a Trans Frontier Conservation Project. Area, but it's not the Kavango one. We are an extension of the Kavango one, so it finishes just outside our area. In some broad senses, when they look at ecosystems, they do include the Lower Zambezi, and then other ones they don't. It's a smaller area. But there's two TFCAs in our area. One is Zimbabwe and Zambia, so across the river from us, and they call it the Mana Pools Lower Zambezi TFCA, because it's all protected area across the river from us, and we're mainly protected area on this side. And then if you go further to the east, we go into Mozambique. So there's another one called Zamoza, which is Zambia, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe. Yeah, sorry, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Zambia, Zamoza. And that's another TFCA. And we've recently put in a grant application for the Mana Pools Lower Zambezi one, because we're trying to assist the governments to get it signed off, because in concept level it is there, but it is not formally signed off with the three governments yet. Yeah.
Thank you. Wow. I love listening to you guys because I learn something every time. It is just fantastic. We're getting great feedback from everyone. Everyone is enjoying your presentation and sharing your brains with us. So thank you so much for your time. I don't see any more questions in the chat. So let's give Ian and Nikita a round of applause. We are so thankful to have you. And I know I speak for IEF. Thank you for your great partnership all these years, and we are proud to support your great work.
Yeah, Sarah and Deborah and everyone, it's so nice, and the Barry Foundation,
Family trust.
that we just, like I said before, we could not do what we do without people who care in places like that, you know, where you are now, and all the support you bring, and to have these long-term supports also, and the relationships and partnerships we have with the likes of IEF is just fantastic. Yeah, so a huge thank you to all of you.
We're
Wonderful.
very happy. We're very happy to be able to help. It is more important to us to help. You can't, I always say to our partners in Africa and Asia that you give us so much more than we give you. So thank you.
I don't know about that. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's a team effort. Yeah.
Well, wonderful. Thank you guys so much. Julie, did you have some final words?
Sure. I just want to thank everybody for being on the call, and thank you all for sticking with us today through our technical difficulties. And just let everybody know that I know that everybody who's on the call should have my email address. So if you come up with any questions after we get done, feel free to email me and we can get the questions answered through the proper channels. And I just want to also just give a heartfelt thank you to everybody, because I know that we have a myriad of folks who are on the line today, people that work at zoos, IEF donors, just a lot of different people across the gamut. And I just want to thank you all, because every one of you helps us be able to, help these projects. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Yeah. And sorry again for our lateness also. Yeah.
We're so happy that it worked out, and we really appreciate your time. So thank you again.